Hello friends and family, it's that time again. This one is episode 11, blog 11, dated 8th of the 5th, 2022. And I keep saying it, but it goes quicker all the time. So 11 in and I'm still a nervous Nelly. And I just hope everybody is having some interesting aspects of this blog. I hope my family do when they eventually do get round to seeing it when I'm dead. Um, but we'll see how that goes. And as you know, my brain's kerfuddled, so I have to use a pad to write everything down, which is why you see me looking down. In fact, I might actually get one of those document holders with just a prompt on. I really ought to get a little bit more organised. I'm usually an organised person, but that's definitely something that would probably be beneficial if I can just find a space to put it in. Okay, so we do the news first. Like again, I'll be looking down. We start off with the war. The Ukraine citizens and troops were held up in a steelworks this week, and I believe there was a truce supposed to be arranged so that the citizens could get out, but the Ukrainians didn't believe a word of what the Russians were saying, and so they held up and were continuing to fight. Now that was earlier in the week, and I didn't hear the outcome of that, but I totally get it when you consider they cordoned off all of the exits into other countries for the refugees. President Zelensky, the Ukrainians, states that peace talks will only succeed if Russia pull back to pre-invasion positions. And I can totally understand where he comes from with that, but it's just Russia wants Ukraine back. So I don't see them pulling back. They'll go pull back how far, and why should we? The war is terrible. I agree with aspects of what my friend Mainmeister says, in that the news articles will now start to become less newsworthy, i.e. top stories. But we should never forget just how much of a thing this is that's going on in the world at the moment. And I mention that because most of the news stories that are going on this week have been mostly local. So the next one was the local elections. So yes, we had the local elections this week. What I wrote down was the Lib Dems gained, Labour didn't gain enough, and the Conservative lost a lot. And the outcome, I don't get it. I have no idea what that means, because I know it all is on seats. It's all about votes in Parliament, and you need the most seats, with most of the Conservative losses going to the Lib Dems and the Labour gaining a lot in London but not gaining enough in the north. All that means is it's going to be hung again. My God, this whole system really does need a relook at. So the Conservatives at the moment are considering Boris Johnson's position. Well, duh. But you see, we're still 2 years away from a general election, and we still need a leader that's been dealing with things that have been going on now for years. But I'm not a politician. I've got no political gains. For me, I just listen to the news and go, how does that affect me in my job? How does that affect my mother and I? So I don't really have any opinion of it whatsoever. And just a little snippet of news, because this interested me. A company called Spare One developed a cell phone that just makes phone calls, and it's got a bit of a torch on it, and it runs off of one AA battery and lasts 14 days, and if switched off it will last as long as the battery can last. Now, I put that last bit at the end because the article said if you switch it off, the battery will last 14 years. But as far as I'm concerned, the battery will be mush within about 3 years, leaking all sorts. But it took me back to the days of your top phone was the best phone if it could last longer than 5 days. Nokia's in particular. And here we are with all our smartphones and so forth. We're lucky if we get through a day. And it brought me to the fact that this is supposed to be sort of like a little side phone, a phone that is an emergency phone. Probably a good idea because my battery doesn't last that long. But it brings me around to Samsung again because that's the phones that I buy. Here's my Note 20, which I've had now for a while, and I do use the S Pen to write on. Very much something that I do because I go into meetings and write down lots of stuff. Samsung decided that they don't want to make that phone anymore. It was their flagship phone for a number of years, and they've now put in all of their money and development into their fold phones. And I was interested in the fold phone for a number of reasons, because they showed a development of it where it slid out like a sheet of paper from the phone and rolled back in. But this fold, it's got a hinge and you can see a line down the middle. I don't know. It's and to be quite honest, $2,000 for a phone. It's just far. We haven't got the money, Samsung. We haven't got the money. I know that you want your money to put into your next development, but I want to also live comfortably and answer a call, which I can do on your phone that you've given me. So I really am lost when it comes to phones, because it used to be a big thing each year. There's the new phone coming out and I'd get quite excited. And I haven't been excited like that in 8 years. I think the last time I got excited was when I bought a Note 8. So we're going back sometimes now. I had Galaxy phones before that. So that ends that, and then we just talk about a little bit about how I'm feeling and so forth. More anticipation and angst is what I'm feeling at the moment, because we're rushing towards the 12th, which is when my hearing is for my appeal. But I mustn't lose track of the fact that there's an extra thing going on where I might go down a tribunal route. But all this does is just give me sleep deprivation and worry. So I just, in many ways, I want it over with, and in other ways, I want it to be as far away as possible, because I've got a job and money coming in, and that means I'm still working. So let's get on to other things, shall we? So what did I watch this week? Well, I watched the end of Moon Knight. What did I think about that? Not my character, and I know very little about that character, even though I've got a number of comics. And I didn't think much to it, to be quite honest. I should like something with Egyptian backgrounds, because I used to like Stargate and all of that sort of stuff, but I don't know, I just didn't feel it with this. I went to the pictures yesterday and saw Doctor Strange, and I give that one a thumbs up as an entertaining film. I'd give it 7.5 out of 10 if I was to give it anything. It's complex. The shots are very, very choppy and quick. And the ending, just like all the Marvel films, is open to interpretation. There are end credits scenes at the end and a mid-credits scene, just like you get in a normal Marvel movie. But I will say things about Marvel movies is that they're entertaining. There are the boring ones, there are the awful ones, there are the middle ones, and there are the fantastic ones. Most of mine, I just fit into it's entertaining popcorn stuff. And the thing about the Marvel films is that if you're a comic reader, you get more out of it. And if you're a general watcher, you're not alienated. I think that's the best that Marvel could hope for. You're not going to get everybody to go out and buy your comics just after reading a film, watching a film. Yesterday I watched Star Trek Strange New Worlds, the new pilot episode of their ongoing series, which tells the story before Kirk. It's early days, but I like the look of it. I thought it was all right, and story-wise, it started off okay. That's all I can really say about it. So, definitely go and watch that if you're interested in a Star Trek film that's not as well. I don't want to say dull, but in the doldrums like Discovery became, Picard 2 slightly better and Lower Decks less said about that, the better. But it's still under the same production teams as all the others, so you're not going to get, if you didn't like it before, I don't think you're going to get anything out of this one. So, what have I done this week? Well, I was on Friday while I was working. I finished quite early at 4 o'clock, and I was at home because I was working from home. So I decided that I wanted to upgrade my administration skills, and I updated one of my tablet laptops that I've got. I've got 11 laptops, a couple of tablets, the PC. I've got 3 of them all around me. So this one here, I don't know if you can see it, is HP Elite X2 Bang & Olufsen edition, and I've upgraded it to Windows 11. I thought, why not? It's about time. I wanted to see what it looked like. I wanted to see whether that would give me an advantage later on in my career. What I tend to find with companies is that companies stay behind by 2 operating systems because they want to become bulletproof with security. We're on 10 at work, so that destroys that theory. But that's what Lloyds Bank taught me when I worked for them for 16 years. And what do I think of it first off? It's a bit weird. You've got to get used to it. It hasn't crashed. I've looked at very few new features, but the installation was just like you saw before. When you go through the wizard at the end, the faster your processor, the quicker you'll go through the installation. This one, I believe, was, for me, under, about 25 minutes, 20 minutes. When you consider how long it was, hours back in the day. So, I had fun upgrading it. I'll have fun looking at that. I chose this tablet because it's, A, it is a tablet, and B, it's got an i7 processor in it with quite a bit of RAM. So I didn't use my top of the range, which has got an i9 processor laptop, but I'm using that for production reasons, so I won't do anything as coarse as that just yet. So my big shout outs, because I had lots of comments and so forth this week. Cauldron of Stardust, Down the Rabbit Hole, LFC Gamer and Vlogs, Robert Morrison, Ian Batchelor, Colin Ferguson, Jambon Elemental, 8-Bit Steve, Milfy Swimbuckle, Martroid, Panther UK have all made comments. Some of them have raised some questions. I've answered some of the questions in my comments area, but there are a couple that I'll answer in the blog because they asked me to. Panther, you're not going to make me squirm, up yours. So that's my little joke. Panther and I, by the way, we've known each other for a couple of years now, and we always have our little tongue bashing tit for tat, which I quite like, and I believe he does as well. Now, as you know, I watch a lot of your guys' videos, and Down the Rabbit Hole has brought out a couple the last week and a half. He did a Judge Dredd parody while reviewing a game. He did what we always do, I think. When you go on holiday, you bring things back. He was showing that he had gone to the Star Wars universe and brought Tatooine sand back with him, all sorts of stuff. And he made some little displays. That was funny. But the sad one for him is that he's got a virtual reality game on the PlayStation called Moss Book 2, which I know a little bit about from the first game. And it's sad for him because it's not sold well. He's deliberated on why he feels it hasn't been sold. I listened to that and agreed pretty much with it. I think the good news about a title like that is that it is coming to the Quest. And I think when it comes to the Quest, it will probably become more successful. And the reason I say that is that I think a lot of people are selling their PlayStation VR units now because the PlayStation 5 is out. The old technology really doesn't suit the PlayStation, the VR unit doesn't really suit the PlayStation 5, and they're developing their own new PlayStation VR headset for the 5. So a lot of people are selling their VR headsets. So who's going to buy the game then if it's only on the PlayStation, if it's an exclusive? So there's that to throw in down the rabbit hole. Colin's been doing, I think, mostly his arcade kerfuffle stuff, so he's been playing his games. They're always entertaining, but I'm not involved in the kerfuffle, probably because I'll destroy you all. No, I'm only joking. But always entertaining to watch that. And that brings me to Milfy, who's asked some questions, and Panther's asked a question as well. So, Milfy wanted to know the same question that was in Mainmaster's question this week, which is somebody who's died that's motivated me or moved me or made an influence on me. I think that was the gist of it. And, you have to give these things thought, but I agree. Sometimes I like to think on the spot. So I listened to what Mainmeister said, but I didn't think what my answer was going to be until literally 5 minutes before this recording. So, because I looked at it in much the same way as Mainmeister did, which is there have been lots of people that are now leaving me, through death because they were childhood heroes. Now, just before broadcast here, yesterday, George Perez, an artist for Marvel and DC, died yesterday after a long battle. And Neil Adams, another artist that was big on Batman and DC, died the week before. And my childhood is diminishing week by week. And there have been people that I've been very sad to see go. Stan Lee was a big one when he went. Because I'm a big filmy, when Jack Lemmon went, when Walter Matthau went, all of these heroes that I've watched on screen, Laurel and Hardy goes back years and years, so you feel less about that. And I've actually, when I've been to the States, gone to Laurel and Hardy's graves because it's in California. So I don't think that answered the question, because it's more about somebody that you probably knew less about and want to know more about. And so I'm finding it very difficult to answer, because I thought to myself, what about Rod Serling, who did The Twilight Zone? But I've read his autobiography, so that takes that away. So I'm going to talk about Steve Ditko, because Steve Ditko is a conundrum to many people. He co-created Spider-Man with Stan Lee, left after 39 issues under a big cloud. Nobody really knows why he left. There's a big argument, we know that. There's a lead up to something that was going on. But this guy didn't cash any of his checks while he was at Marvel, and didn't even after that. I mean, how this man kept going, I don't know, but they discovered all of his checks that he never cashed during his life at his home. So I understand as well that he understood more than Kirby that he was a jobbing artist, that he was paid to do a job, and once he'd left a job, that was it. He didn't want to talk about it anymore. It was like, that's my job, I've done that job, I now move on, that's in the past, I don't really want to talk about it. And that's what keeps that mystery open. There's been an exhibit open, and the people, you know, his family, his living family, trying to honour him. I'd like to go and visit that, but I don't think even his family know his deepest thoughts. I know that he was a very shy man. He didn't like to open the door. He rarely went out. He must have gotten over the leaving of Spider-Man behind, because he did stuff for Marvel later on. But by this point, Stan Lee was a different person. He was now going around schools and doing discussions and being the front man that we all recognise Stan Lee for. So Steve Ditko is probably one that I'd love to know more about, just to get over the argument, why did you leave? But also to know his inner feelings about the industry he worked in for 70 years of his life. That's a huge amount. And if you didn't get satisfaction or were happy in that, I'd be very sad to hear that. But I want to know the reason why, and I'd like to know more about him. So that's my answer to that, and I hope that's a good enough answer. Now, Panther asked one, and he thought it would make me squirm, and it did for a little bit, because anybody who knows me and my soundtracks knows I'm a little bit old school, and Panther wanted to know, are there any new composers that I'm impressed with? And to be quite honest, I've watched more TV than I have films. And even now, when I went to see Doctor Strange and I was looking at the credits, Danny Elfman's done the score to that, and that's, again, who I consider the old brigade. So most of the composers that I like are dead. But, you know, obviously, you know, John Williams is still doing stuff, and James Horner's dead. But, you know, it gets harder and harder, and I have to watch a film a couple of times and then listen to the score separately for me to then understand the score. And I've been doing less and less watching. So, but I did come up with one name, and I'm no good at pronouncing Panther, and that's where I probably squirm. Michael Giacchino or Giacchino. Now, that might mean something to you, I don't know, but the reason he came up was because it's the Star Trek connection again, and our games, believe it or not. Now, when I started to look at this, because I have got a number of his scores, don't get me wrong, I didn't know at the time that he had written many of the music to the 16-bit SNES and Mega Drive consoles. He did Lion King and Jurassic Park Lost Worlds, which is where he cut his teeth, believe it or not. And he even did some of the Call of Duty games later on, putting full orchestral scores into the Call of Duty games on our 360s and Xbox Ones and so forth. Now, this is where I knew him, is TV work, because he did Fringe, Lost and Alias. And those are 3 shows that I did see, Fringe being an interesting one because that's my fave. But what I also noticed, and I knew this from a long time back, that when he was doing Lost, the score is so unique. They actually used pieces of fuselage from the plane for the percussion of the instruments in the score. Now that takes me all the way back to some of the best composers like Jerry Goldsmith, where he wanted to find weird instruments. He didn't want to just use the orchestra. Synthesizers was something they embraced. So that's all really good. But when it comes to the film tracks, yes, he did the Star Trek reboot, the J.J. Abrams scores. He did Pixar's Up, which I've got the score to as well. And just recently, he's done the Spider-Man No Way Home, and he's done the Batman score. So he's a busy guy. Now, they're saying the Batman score is a great score, and I've listened to it, but I don't feel that at all. I don't think there's a theme. He must have had great fun with the Spider-Man one, because he did the other films, and he was managing to bring in motifs and sounds and little snippets of the previous Spider-Man films, which he had no involvement with, to bring into this film, because it obviously brought in Tobey Maguire and Andy Garfield. So that must have been really fun. So I'm hoping that answers your question, Panther. It's the only composer I could come up with. Okay. So what do I do now? Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about another little hobby of mine, cameras. Now, I'm thinking of upgrading my camera. And I believe that's because I'm starting to feel I need to get out more. Now, I was looking for all my boxes. Don't laugh. We've all had cameras in the past, Polaroids, all sorts of stuff. Look it up. This was my first expensive camera, which was an Olympus AZ300 Super Zoom. It used proper film. Now, I remember buying this. I got it from Dixon's, and it was £399, and I bought it about 2 months after passing my driving test. So that would date this at being 1987, 88, somewhere around there. And obviously all of our phones have got cameras in them. But my mid-price camera, the camera that I used to just carry around with me, was another Olympus. This one's called an Olympus SZ30MR. And it doesn't look any different than anything than you'd get with anything else. But it is unique in the fact it's... Where is it? 3D. Okay, so it's got two lenses inside this little flap here. And I got it at the same time as I got a 3D TV. Had great fun with that. Not too bad, 24 megapixel. But then I started to get into DSRs. This has been my little baby for taking pictures. It's an EOS 700D. A lovely camera. It's what I take all my statues and stuff with. And my favourite lens is this Canon. So these are both Canons. This is a sort of my everyday lens and hood. Okay, 28 to 135 millimeter. I don't use much of this, but it's got autofocus and manual focus, and it does have a stabilizer. Now, I'm saving for a newer camera. I'd like to go for a 7D, a 5D, a 3D, somewhere around there, because that's a more expensive body. And I'm one of these people that believe the lens is more important than the body, really. But I'm starting to find limitations with the focal points on this particular camera, and I'd like to get into macro photography. Now, I've only got a macro lens with no stabilization. Macro lenses with stabilization cost the earth. Now, these were all my lenses have been the ultrasonic range, which is slightly above the standard. I'd love to buy the grey, the grey lenses that Canon bring out, that all of the paparazzi use, but they're thousands of pounds. So I need to win the lottery. Now, I haven't bought anything this week, so we're heading now into what discoveries I've got. So we always do some Laserdisc stuff, don't we? Found this in my collection, Brainstorm. I don't know if anybody knows a little bit about Brainstorm, but this is one of those films that did not work in pan and scan. because at the end there's a massive light show, and it was 70mm. So when the Laserdisc came out of this, I had to have it. And as I told you, Down the Rabbit Hole did a did a parody of Judge Dredd, so I found my Judge Dredd Laserdisc. And then the expensive Laserdisc for this week is Toy Story, which is probably the second most expensive Laserdisc I've ever bought. Okay, you can see, huge monster, doesn't even tell you much about what's in here. But I can tell you now that the reason I bought this is that I was heavily into ray tracing. In fact, I bought my Amiga and did more ray tracing on it than I probably than I played games. But it had all the Pixar shorts, and it had about their early development of ray tracing and digital animation. That was the reason why I bought that. Now, very, very quickly, Down the Rabbit Hole wanted me to review Uncharted because he'd had an argument or had a discussion with his wife. Now, I have played the games, PlayStation 4, Uncharted 4 there, and I've played the earlier ones, and on the handhelds. And I did get round to watching Uncharted in 4K. What do I think of it? It's an entertaining film. Well, I don't know what else to say about it. It's a nothing. I count these things as nothing films. I used to look forward to Indiana Jones, and I knew where I stood with Indiana Jones. Here's this oldish guy, because when I was watching him I was younger, so you look up to him. It was set in the 40s, so of course you understood the war and all of that was going on, and the settings, I think, are very mysterious for the 40s and 50s. And you knew who the baddies were, and you know who the goodies were. And you had the odd character later on that you just, I don't know who you are and what you do and whether you're a backstabber or not. Uncharted is just full of backstabbers. You don't know who's your friend. It's like the Tomb Raider films and like the National Treasure films. And that's what this film is. It's National Treasure in a game. And now they've turned the game into a film. So Uncharted, does it take away the fact that it was a game? No, in fact it probably works better, because if you think about it, they're narrative driven, so to have a film about it, it's great. It's better than Tomb Raider anyway, I can certainly say that. Resident Evil went on way too long, and really it could have told a much better story. So I don't know if that's given you any idea down the rabbit hole on what I thought about Uncharted, because I don't think it was miscast. It's just the backstabbing got to me, and the set pieces worked. So I really enjoyed it. I gave it 7.5 out of 10. Would that answer your question? Don't know. So films that I found this week that are some of my favourites. Westworld on Steelbook. Obvious reasons. I think I've mentioned it before. I like science fiction. Westworld is a sort of favourite. Future World, not so much. Forbidden Planet, because I've started to watch a lot of old science fiction films. Day the Earth Stood Still I watched this week. Brilliant. And as I told you, Leon, the long version, is now on 4K, so watch that. And I'm a big Fifth Element kind of guy. These are all steel books, so they stay in these lovely covers, by the way. They protected covers so they don't scratch the steel books. And I mentioned last week about a couple of older films. That's Monster Club. Believe it or not, it's on Blu-ray, my God. And The Man Who Haunted Himself. And the reason I bought these is because they're sort of like what I call comfort faves, you know, pleasure films for me, because I go back to them probably about once a year. And the reason this one holds an awful lot for me is the music score is actually on this, along with the score that I've got, and it's slightly different. So it's worth getting some of these older films. You just need to look at the back. And the last thing I want to talk about And I'll have to be very quick, I'm sorry to say. My favourite bit is the soundtracks. And the only thing I've really been listening to this week is a guy called Bernard Herrmann. What can I say about Bernard Herrmann? Now, I've had to prompt myself by writing a lot of this down. Now, he died at the age of 64 in 1975. And his last track won him a lot of kudos because it was Taxi Driver. So he was starting to work with Martin Scorsese. How that would have gone on, I don't know, but he used to collaborate an awful lot with directors. He worked in 1934 for CBS Radio and was discovered by Orson Welles, who took him under his wing and asked him to help him with his radio shows, and they collaborated and brought out the famous War of the Worlds broadcast. Which has got notoriety as people, if you believe it, that it was real, that we were actually being invaded. I doubt that. But I wasn't around in 1938, so I can't say. Bernard Herrmann did the score to Citizen Kane. Everybody knows Citizen Kane is well up there in the stratosphere of all-time greatest films. I've watched it. It's a good film. I don't know where it gets the greatest bit from, but I'm probably missing a trick with Citizen Kane because I'm not a scholar of film. I just know what I like to watch. And it's a good film, but it's just I don't know where the stratosphere bit comes from. So we get to the 40s, and he did a film called Devil and Daniel Webster, for which he won an Oscar. That's his first Oscar, and that is known as being the start of the great soundtracks. But it's also got a little bit of news in there in the fact that it's the first use of overdubbing. There's a piece in the scene where there's one fiddler supposed to be playing something that's impossible to play on the fiddle. And what he actually did was he got 4 fiddle players and overdubbed over the top to make it look like it was one person. Little bit of knowledge background for you there. In the 50s, oh my God. Now this is the era that I sort of go with. Day the Earth Stood Still is one of the scores where he used 2 Herrmanns, an electric violin, an electric cello and electric bass. This is where he started to embrace electronic instruments. And my, is that score distinctive. That's the word I was looking for, because from then on, the Herrmann and the type of music for science fiction, you know, kept trying to beat Bernard Herrmann's score or match it, and they could never do it. In fact, Lost in Space, the TV show, uses excerpts from it all the way through the TV show. It's that distinctive. Now, when we get to the 50s and 60s is the era that I'm very big into because I'm an Alfred Hitchcock fan. And Bernard Herrmann collaborated with Hitch 7 films. And of those 7 films, North by Northwest and Vertigo are my favourites. North by Northwest, what can I say about that? My favourite Bernard Herrmann score, without a doubt, with Vertigo very close behind. Psycho's great, and what it tries to do is great. Birds has no score, but he's quoted, he's mentioned in the Birds because he did all the sound effects for the Birds. So, and they're not all just recordings of birds and so forth around. Now, what happens after Bernard Herrmann in the 60s is a shame, because most people considered him old and not moving with the times. But he did some great scores. Some of these might make sense to you. Jason and the Argonauts, The 3 Worlds of Gulliver, and Journey to the Centre of the Earth. And what you have to understand about that is those are films that I used to watch as a kid, and they were Ray Harryhausen type films. So of course I was already listening to Bernard Herrmann tracks without even knowing. I think everybody knows Jason and the Argonauts and the skeleton scene, and you could just hear the tune right now. So then we get to the end, and it's Taxi Driver and Hitch's last film, Obsession, and so forth. And so when I'm talking about a rich composer, Bernard Herrmann's it. That's the end. Oh my God, I've gone over the 30 minutes. I'm so sorry, guys. I tried to do the 30 minutes because I don't want you to get bored and I don't want you to click through. But I hope you found some areas of this interesting. You're all my friends. I love your comments. I love your questions. Keep them up if you can. They keep me occupied during the week, you see. Keeps that brain going. And I'm Billy No Mates. So, until next week. Bye-bye.